Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. Jonna Sullivan, and I am the host today for Totus Tuus Evangelization Network. And this is a platform that's dedicated to Catholic and religious and laity, mystics, evangelists, prophets. And the idea is to prepare all of us for this glorious reign and kingdom of God that is coming as he has proclaimed. And we're doing that through various venues. And today I am truly honored and privileged to be able to have Ted Flynn with us on Totus Tuus. And we certainly have a full schedule here. The idea is to really enlighten you and to give you the power within of God's love and mercy to be able to speak the truth and be the light of Christ and be able to endure the future. So let me just give you a little narrative about Ted. I could spend probably an hour on his introduction, but just cut and paste for Ted Flynn. Well, he has traveled over 50 countries in the world, both business and pleasure, but he has spoken over 700 venues of the world and has done over 300 radio and TV and religious and cultural speeches. He is born in Washington, D.C. area. He's been a resident there anyway for about 45 years and has been involved in various apostolates for that as long as well. He is married to his wife, Maureen, and they co-founded a crisis pregnancy center back in 1987. And then in 1988, Signs of the Times was started, as many of you, mostly all of you would probably know Signs of the Times. He's the author of The Thunder of Justice, Hope of the Wicked, Idols of in the House, The Great Transformation, Finding Peace of Soul in Troubled Times, The Diabolical Disorientation, The Roots of the Crisis in the Family, the Church and Nation and the Culture. And this latest one now that we are going to be talking today is The Great Reset, the Globalist Plan versus Heaven's Victory. So, and he has a great little, I guess it's like a little pocket pamphlet about Garabandal and its secrets. That is the warning of the miracle of Garabandal, like nothing's been seen before in history. Thank you, Ted, for being here. So much to talk about and just amazing. I mean, it's so much to embrace. And yet we want to set a tone for our viewers that this is not to alarm you. This is to enlighten you for you to have a preparation and to know that the end is hope and victory and that there is God's love and mercy, and it's up to you to trust in that mercy. So Ted, I'm going to give it to you and your introduction here with the Great Reset. Let's just start. What prompted you to start these writings, these books, about secular and religious issues for today?
Well, I guess if you want to go all of the way back, I mean, the first book that I wrote, it took 5 years, was called The Thunder of Justice. And I was actually working in Eastern Europe and then in the former Soviet Union. I had an office and an apartment actually in Warsaw right after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And then during perestroika, glasnost of the fall of the Soviet Union of 92 and 3 and somewhat into 4, we saw that fall. And what I had been privileged to see, I had been to school twice in Europe. I like to travel. I literally, even as a 20-year-old, started hitchhiking around the world. I left school in Switzerland and started hitchhiking around the world. And I had seen a lot of these places. I had seen literally what took place with the Blessed Mother in Egypt, where she appeared above a church there. And one of the people, even in the audience, was actually Anwar Sadat that saw that, and it diffused the war. So I had seen a lot of these apparition sites in a lot of my travels, and I had seen how similar they are in messages. And up until that time, I had noticed that the people that believed in Fatima, they were, mind you, the late 80s, early 90s, it was Fatima only, or they were into Rue de Bac only, or Guadalupe only, yet, or La Salette, or Lourdes. And they're all legitimate, and they are what they are. But I saw the common themes, and so I decided to put together a book on these common themes. And I personally didn't think anybody would buy it. Because I just, in being in business, and what I was doing was retrofitting power plants in the former Soviet Union with World Bank and multilateral money. I just wasn't around that, but I had an interest in it. I'm in Poland, so what do I see? I go see Czestochowa. And it had been like that all over. So I saw these common themes that the Blessed Mother, in essence, had the same message. And it was in a very non-sectarian way. And all I saw was truth in it. And so that's what really has prompted a lot of the writings. And I also had heard in my life, they say, how do people do it, with the pressures of the world? How do they deal with these pressures of the world without God? And how do they do it? And the answer is, as I've grown older and older, is they don't. They collapse. And unless a person has Christ at the center of their life, and they're looking at that as the rock, they don't cope emotionally with the trials of the world.
Absolutely. And this is a very important point. And I think many people think this, but they don't talk about it. Not many. But the fact is, you only have to be around a person so long where you understand for a brief time, where they stand on several matters. And there's this agenda that we've talked about, like Satan's army almost type of thing on earth, that people are starting to begin to see what is unfolding. And yet, it just didn't happen overnight. This is things that have been a gradual decline over the years for our country and others by us just ignoring a lot of this cultural demise that has been unfolding. And silence has been the consent of it. And that being said, we're in the midst of this transformation, a transformative process. And we're at what I think you have called in your book, America is at the changing of the guard, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, the Christian church, or the believing church, is where it is because they have remained silent. And I think if a person of our generation, or even older, and it's probably not the younger generation that can pinpoint the problem. It's by order of the United States Supreme Court, where they took prayer and the Bible out of the classroom. Democracy and living in a republic, a constitutional republic, requires a believer to keep the system together, to keep it from becoming unglued. And it's the believer. Why? Because they choose to obey laws, because it's for the good of the whole. It's for the good of everybody to obey laws. But we're turning now into a lawless nation. And it couldn't be more simple, because we've turned into a godless nation. And when they took prayer out of the classroom and forbid the Bible in it, we sealed our fate as a nation, in my opinion.
I agree.
And that's why Roe versus Wade came right after that.
And you know what, Ted? I mean, what I have seen, and I agree with what you have written, is the decline of a country empire is not from things from the outside. It's what is morally within that has, disrupted and corrupted and starting to not only our soul, but our country.
Will Durant, the great historian that President Jerry Ford gave the United States Medal of Freedom to, who had written, his first book was The Story of Philosophy when he was a professor at Seton Hall University. And then after that, he used to go to Europe with take students every year. And then he began to write with his wife, Ariel Durant, The Story of Civilization, which is an 11-volume set, which I've read 10 out of the 11. And they're like these monster, like 12 by 10 books, and they're like 1,000 pages each. And at the end of his life, he wrote a book called Lessons of History. It's 99 pages. It's very thin. It's 99 pages. It's a hardback, but there's an interesting point that he makes in there. And he said, great empires don't usually die from without. They commit suicide.
Wow.
And that's, in his Lessons of History, where he's musing on everything he's learned. And if you take a look what's happening today, we're committing suicide as a nation with our social policies, which are flying directly into the face of God, human nature, reason, and logic. And that's why we find ourselves in this mess today, frankly.
Okay, so that's why you feel the family values have changed so much in the past 20 years?
Well, I think it's even more than 20 years. I mean, if you want to take a look at a generation at 20 years, some people put them at 15 because of, birth way back in the Middle Ages. But, but let's just say it's 20. We're right now, since the 60s and the Cultural Revolution, the Sexual Revolution, we're way beyond that, as we're 60 years now.
Wow.
And, this has been incremental rot. And I think the biggest thing that I've observed in my adult life is we are here because of what you just said. Our silence has been consent. When we have seen error, the believing church has remained silent. Now, let's talk about how a believer, I think, should deal with that. I don't think a believer gets any ground by screaming at somebody, arguing with somebody over faith or religion. There's a verse in Proverbs that I've used my whole life, and it says this. We were just talking about it. A soft answer turns away wrath. A soft answer turns away wrath. It's from Proverbs. And, you can use reason, philosophy, a theological principle. You don't have to quote scripture to a person, but because usually that doesn't get anywhere with an unbeliever, and they usually, don't like it anyway and will begin to build more defenses. But just by a logical question of truth, and the truth, if spoken by one, is still a truth. It pierces the soul. And that's why in Romans it says the truth never returns void. When you speak the truth to an individual, but that person has to know you care. Mm-hmm. And the art of discipleship is a person can sense if an individual cares, in the exact same way students can size up a teacher if they care. And they'll size them up in 5 minutes in a classroom. And in the art, you have to build a relationship with people. I found that, I've gone 20 years without ever mentioning, they may know what I do or don't do. A lot of people Google it and they get a reading on you. But I've gone 20 years without ever mentioning Jesus Christ to a non-believer who I see, because I know it's not going to produce fruit. And his hatred of the church is so great, stemming from an internal wound in his family with his father. Until he's healed of that, he can't have a reasonable thought.
Okay, so I hope you listeners are hearing this, because this is like critical. How do you navigate? Okay, we're all around it. We're around riots, and you can't look at someone the wrong way. They're going to hit you. You say something they don't like, or you misspeech, or you show anger. Next thing you know, your tires are slashed, or you get bumped in the head and you're in a coma. There's just such a change out there. How do you navigate and this craziness, if you will, like Ted is talking about, and keep that peace of soul and be able to, you just don't let something go by and not say anything. That silence is that consent, but there is a way to do it without causing friction,
Well, that's
that love. You have to show that love.
Right. This is the beating heart of literally the Great Reset. How do we navigate this culture? And I use an example in two places that I have found, which I wrote chapters on both of these. The chapter on how the Lord spoke literally to his Hebrew people is a chapter called the Daniel Factor, which is one of the largest ones in the book. And the Daniel Factor is about this. I've been looking for this for years and years and years. And then just reading Jeremiah, I saw it with the book of Daniel. And book of Daniel has been so profound for me in Daniel as a character in the Bible. I named my son after Daniel in the Bible because he stood against the tide of the culture and he prevailed through faith and all of his attributes, if you look at the attributes of Daniel. But let's get back to how do we navigate this, which was the question. In the book of Jeremiah, the Lord is very, very clear. He's going to banish his people to captivity for 70 years, over let's say 3.5 generations at 20 years. That's a long time. That's your great-great-grandfather, if you're a young child. So what's he banishing them for? He is banishing them to captivity under Nebuchadnezzar for disobeying the Sabbath, something so innocuous today, where today we could look at the Sabbath as a day of errands, maybe going to church on Saturday nights so, you don't have to go on Sunday so you can play golf or watch the NFL starting at 11 in the morning, and then with West Coast games going to maybe 2 in the morning because it's over at 11, and being glued to the television and not obeying the Sabbath. So obeying the Sabbath to the Lord is a commandment. It's not a suggestion. And so the people disobeyed that. But here, Jeremiah told the people of Israel how to survive in captivity from where the Lord told him to tell the people. And this, I think, is worth the whole price of admission for our culture today, because it's helped me a lot as I'm seeing the nuttiness every single hour, like you and everybody else, and how to navigate this and still keep peace of mind and soul. So he says to the people, it's in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 5 through 14. It's literally only 10 verses where here's what the Lord says to the people. Plant, harvest, have children, give your daughters away in marriage, give your sons away in marriage, nurture your grandchildren, and stick to the traditions and foundations of your faith. There it is. It's so profound, and it's just in a few verses. Plant, harvest. What's he saying? Go to work every day. If you're in technology, have a computer that works. If you're not many farmers, it's not an agrarian culture like it was for thousands of years. So, what does it mean? He's saying stick to the fundamentals of living. Plant, harvest, do what you need to do. Raise your children, stick to the traditions of your faith. Now, we have a tendency as a people to go out and pick daisies, which is a metaphor for me of on the non-essentials. So we already know what the absolute rubrics and fundamental aspects of the faith are. We've been told all in scripture, as well as everything in our traditions. It's the rosary, it's Mass being the center of your life, it's confession, it's adoration, which very, very, very few people do. They talk about it. And scripture reading. Okay, so there it is. There's the foundations. And if we stick to those, we will be fine. Mm-hmm. But, will there be trials? Yes. Will there be hardships? Yes. But we're going to be able to endure those if we stick to the rock.
Mm-hmm. And there's faith. Christians as well involved with that. They may not be Catholic, but I know a lot of Christians that will go before the Blessed Sacrament and pray, and they pray the Bibles. And I know one person that wasn't Catholic, and his friend was Catholic and died. He prayed the Rosary because he knew he liked the Rosary, and they become closer. They feel something. They know something is different. And so, but what's happening is a lot of people who think underneath the Daniel factor of harvesting and preparation, they're thinking this is going to happen. We aren't going to allow to be getting food in our grocery stores unless you have a number or a sign or something like that to get in. And so they're planting. Now they're planting the food that they can. They have their communities. They have refugees. And a lot of people, phone calls that I get, Ted, they're afraid. They're afraid. I don't understand what's going to happen. I'm not going to get to a refuge. I don't, my family isn't, they've estranged from me, and they're so concerned. And most of my time is like you're saying, is trying to calm them and refocus them that God has to be your priority. And
well, it's funny, you were just talking about the rubrics, and I use, when I've spoken a lot, people like this sports metaphor, and it's one of my favorites to explain what we're talking about. I've been a fan of sports since I was a boy. And if you've ever noticed, whether it's Major League Baseball World Series, whether it's FIFA World Cup, whether it's the NBA, after 4 games or 7, whatever it goes, whether it's the NHL Stanley Cup, whatever it is, in the locker room, here's what always happens with the winning team. Notice this from today forward of what happens. There's champagne spraying all over the place, and now they wear goggles, where they never used to. So a reporter goes in, and they find the star, and he's soaking wet. He's happy. They're world champions now in their sport. And here's what's said. Two questions are always asked successively. The reporter literally sticks the microphone in front of the MVP or star, whoever it is, and he says, "How did you get here? How did you get here today?" And they say this every single time. 2 things, but the first is, as a team, let's say it's hockey. As a team, we just practice the fundamentals every single day. Skate, shoot, pass. You can't win. It's a 40% chance statistically. The hockey players know this, coaches know this. When you got a man in the penalty box and it's 5-on-4, the team with 5 has a 40% higher chance of scoring a goal. So now they're a man down for maybe taking a cheap shot and spending 2 or 4 minutes in the penalty box. And then, or even having 2 due to a fight or something like that with the same team. So what is he saying? The fundamentals, stick to the fundamentals, skate, shoot, pass. Don't just take a cheap penalty, ride the person out. You don't have to knock them down, but take them out of the play. And here's the second question every single time. Do you guys get along? It seems like you guys are all friends. It's, I've heard you guys are going to play golf at St. Andrews in 3 weeks after, they're bandaged up and they're waiting a few weeks. And, there's 15 people on a team all going on a golf holiday in Scotland and Ireland. And what that's saying is they're friends. They enjoy each other's company. They trust each other. They like each other. And they say, our wives get together before the games. They have dinner before or after. We celebrate each other's the birthdays for the kids. We go over each other's homes. So they're saying, what are they saying? They like each other and trust each other, which is a community. And when people trust each other and like each other people want to be around that, and it provides a winning formula for everybody. That's why arguing about the faith never gets anybody anywhere. You can have a fraternal correction, but arguing with them doesn't get anywhere. And if they can't hear the gospel, you have to love them into the gospel. It's the art of discipleship, to where you can just use a philosophical principle or something, saying, well, where does that get you if this behavior continues? It's just a simple question that can make them think. And I've had over my lifetime, many, many, many people respond to that, because what happens, it starts with a friendship, and they know you care. And if you care for them, they'll respond in time. So it's sticking to the rubrics of the faith and having a community around you where other people want to be around. And that's why when sometimes people go in somebody's home, they feel peace. And if there's discord, it's like blood is written on the wall, and they can feel it, and they don't want to be a part of it. So I think
That's
that's our
said
answer.
fantastic. That's fantastically, just very dynamically said, very profound. There's no time for fear, time for change, fundamental aspects of it. If you are the light, people want the light. They want to be around you. They see something that you have, and they want to have it. And so very practical, very stick with it, practical. That Daniel factor in Jeremiah is the outlines everything that is needed over the course of history. It has proven to be solid. It's right there in the Word of God.
Daniel never buckled. I mean, there are a lot of people that, that came to the king's court, Nebuchadnezzar's, and they were trying to set Daniel up, and they did. And he ended up, needing to exert his faith for it. But he went to the steward. He was shrewd. This is the origin, incidentally, of the Magi. This is where it originated while they were in captivity, of very, very learned people using the Talmudic principles of survival. And so this is the origin of the Magi under Daniel. And he had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so Daniel stood on his faith. And when he went to the steward, because he wasn't eating the king's rich food, which was against his religion, he said, if I eat mine, and the steward didn't tell on him, but the people that were enemies of Daniel did find out, and they brought it to Nebuchadnezzar and tried to have him killed for it. But through his faith, he was able to prevail over the evil. And that's exactly what I think we should do as well. We have to be shrewd, we have to be logical, we have to be practical, and we have to be godly in it. Exactly how Daniel was.
Mm-hmm. So for people that feel like they can't speak like you speak or show that love, what would you advise them to do? I mean, you said you just can't have a debate with someone who, it's just not going to happen. You have to love them. You have to get to know them. And then they will, after they know you genuinely care for them, they'll listen. But today, with everyone out there, it's hard to even connect with some of the people. What would you say to us how to deal with people like that?
Well, this gets into another chapter in the book called The Mind of an Unbeliever. And, of how hard it is to communicate with people. People are really dug into their ideologies today in a very, very profound way. You can pick almost any subject right now, and you can see literally in a matter of minutes of being with somebody where they stand by what their political stance is. And if yours is opposite, and if you respond, if you remain silent, they may not say anything. But if you respond in a way that's contrary to their thinking, you will basically be written off to marginalized, and they don't want anything to do with you.
Right.
Now, the place where I can see this is in Romans 1. And if anybody wants to get another chapter in the Bible to how to navigate our culture, St. Paul is very close to the end of his life. He's going to be martyred shortly at Trefontane, Italy. And the book of Romans is considered by many biblical scholars to be Paul's most in-depth epistle, because it deals with faith, fides et ratio, faith and reason, but it also deals with that razor's edge of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, which is what you're saying. How do you negotiate with these people by not being too doctrinal? Mm-hmm. But if a person can't hear something, why say it? And Paul in Romans 1 is literally giving nearly 24 descriptions of a mind of an unbeliever, which they're pagan. Now let's say this is year 65 or whatever it is with Paul now in Rome. And it's truly a pagan culture where the gospel has not really surfaced there in a big way. You've got the state, which under the brutes of Rome was persecuting and sending them to the lions. So they weren't exactly receptive to anything that challenged the authority of Caesar. So Paul is literally giving reprobate minds, degenerate, And one of the funniest things I've ever seen in scripture, which I don't see many humorous things in scripture, frankly. The only thing I ever see in where Jesus is maybe being a little bit of a wry question with a little bit of comedy is where he says to Philip of the feeding of the 5,000, he said, Philip, how are we going to feed these people? So he turns and Philip says, I don't know, but Paul literally says at one point, he says, they have no brains. It's like Paul is in the pub after 2 beers talking to his buddy, and he's using the vernacular. They have no brains, And so he's speaking to a pagan mind. Now, we have to understand the narrative that we have. We're a culture right now that is accepting the mutilization of children, where abortion is being fought for and paid for by the government and doing incredible things to keep literally the slaughter of the innocents law. And if you want to see where a division in the seized part in literally as soon as it's brought up with people who are not like-minded, watch what happens when you bring up the Dobbs decision or something, or which now turning out to be red state versus blue state, where the Civil War was North versus South. So we have a new war here now. And so we have to understand that if we say something to truly a pagan, because that's what even the Lord said to Sister Faustina, an unbelievable was, that they basically sanitized to make it more believer versus unbeliever. But the Lord used the word pagan of an unbeliever. So when a person can have this narrative of this pagan ideologies that they have, you have to understand that what you say, they cannot hear it. It's like 2 ships passing in the night. It's like 2 railroad tracks that just don't meet. They just go on. So you have to change your approach of how you negotiate with them. And many times the answer may be not to. And the other day I was literally doing laps in a local pool, which I try to do a couple of days a week. And I jumped in one end and I got to the other end and I'm pushing off the wall and I just look up because I'm right by the rope where people are just more of a free swim. And I look up and I literally see a guy with a beard with earrings, eyeliner, and a 2-piece bathing suit. The guy's in a bikini.
Oh my God.
So, what am I going to say? Am I going to reach this guy? Jesus loves you. It isn't going to work. Am I going to say you're a lunatic, you're a lost soul? No, you have to approach that person. First of all, I didn't engage him. I'm swimming and he wasn't ready to hear me anyway. Mm-hmm. He didn't ask, but it's not often you see a guy with a beard in a bikini with eyeliner and earrings. So how do you talk to him? Be kind to him, because the chances are that wound is so deep, he's never known love. And I've now in my adult life, I've seen until you can locate the wound and find the wound, you can't help a person heal.
That is amazing statement.
Find out what caused that wound, and many times, for the most time, it came from the home or abuse or something, all of these sins that we know, but many times. Every time I've seen an atheist, I've always found the atheist has had a terrible relationship with his mother or his father or both. Every time I've seen an atheist, I've seen, and I've now at my age, I've been able to locate a lot of these wounds, and it usually comes back to parental.
Well, there are a lot of people with wounds out there walking around.
They walk among us. We're wounded ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is we recognize the redemptive plan, and we're looking to Jesus Christ for our solution. So that gets back to, how do people do it without God? They don't.
Mm-hmm. And I will say this, Ted, that, we all, like you said, have our own personal, infirmities and stuff. And I've had, you can have your little enlightenments of yourself. And this is the beauty of reflection in the morning and the evening, what you could have done better and what you would like to do. But you look in some of the areas of your life that maybe you're very sorry for doing. And it can be very painful when you recognize that. But how you look at yourself in that is you have to be merciful and trust in God's mercy for you. Okay. That's why he's God and I'm the sinner. You have to trust that he'll take care of that and be sorrowful for it, and then grow and heal. You can't say, oh, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, and this and that. You have to trust in God's mercy. Otherwise, if you can't, that's at the end when you see God face to face and he says, how have you loved? Right? You're going to judge yourself as you have to be merciful on yourself, because that's what God is. He's all love and merciful.
The only thing people are now going to respond to is kindness and love. I mean, a soft answer turns away wrath. I mean, am I going to say anything to a guy with a beard and a two-piece bathing suit that's going to turn him around? But, the fact is he doesn't want to hear it. He's on a track right now to self-destruction. That's absolutely profound. And everybody knows the people that go through these transgender thing, the procedures, the suicide rate is off the charts. They're very, very unhappy people. They need to understand the love of God, and they need to have somebody who can help love them into that. And that in itself is a challenge. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Now, do I think I'm better than him? No. Do I think he's absolutely fundamentally, profoundly lost? Yes.
Okay. Well, here's another question. Now, we get it now for one-on-one, or someone that you see in a bikini or something like that, a guy, or any person that we know is just completely, off base. What do you think, how people should react to things happening in the government? How did we battle the federal government when they, are not they're keeping God out of the schools, and then now they're changing laws in different areas? And how do we influence governmental policies as a people? We don't seem to be standing up to that. And at what point do you, before, like if you're silent too long, that silence becomes an approval? Consent.
Well, these are profound questions you're asking, because it's the absolute core and fundamental of us as a people. For me, I have been very, very frustrated. I have spoken out. I chose to take a stand. I haven't really cared what people thought. If I think I'm right, not in an arrogant sense or hubris in any way, but I know what the gospel says. And now let's look at the life of Christ to use as our model, which you have to always look at that. Jesus came to do one thing and one thing only. He came to change hearts. He didn't come as a revolutionary. He didn't come to set up his earthly kingdom on a throne where people like Judas and others thought that he was going to be wearing a royal purple and couldn't deal with the fact that he was humble and the son of a carpenter, a carpenter himself. And so they expected something else, as well as the Sadducees and Pharisees and the lawgivers didn't expect, can anything good come from Nazareth? So our model has to be Jesus. He came to change a soul, and he touched a Mary Magdalene, a Joseph of Arimathea, a Nicodemus, the apostles that were very, very disparate. Let's face it, Matthew was an extortionist. Peter and the Zebedee Fishing Company were basically very, very common men, but they had a heart for God. We have to provide alternatives for these people, and this gets back to community. People want to be around people who enjoy each other and not arguing. If you go in and all you're hearing is people really arguing and raising their voice with the faith, why would I want to be a part of that? But if I go in a home or a community or a group of people and see people who truly care for each other, I want to be a part of that. And that's why communities grow. So what is it? We have to be around like-minded people, and we have to be engaged. It's not a time for being the turtle on a fence post. And as I say, the truth, if spoken by one, is still a truth.
Mm-hmm. And this is the reason for Totus Tuus Evangelization Network. This is what we're trying to do for like-minded people, to educate and to voice it, so people know that there's so many people. We are together. We are not alone. So very well spoken, Ted. And this is in our last leg. Let's focus. We've went over the Daniel factor. We've gone over what's been happening through history, what's going to be happening, could be and most likely going to get a lot worse. The last leg, let's talk about hope and the victory in your book on Immaculate Heart triumphing.
Well, we know in the end we win. But Easter, before Easter Sunday comes Good Friday, and Jesus need to go to the cross. You talk about the role of government. We have right now a government that is trying to put everybody in a digital cage to where every single transaction and everything we do is trackable. And ultimately, through digital bank control, a digital currency, it's called central bank digital control. We're going to have a social credit score. And if we're outside the box of what's generally accepted, we're going to be outside the system. So again, this is why it gets back to Daniel factor for me, where, okay, so let's say, we're in two different cities, but each of us go out and we see either Chinese or Russian troops telling us what to do, what to eat, like they did with Daniel. But yet Daniel survived by sticking internally to what he knew to be true, even though enemies were trying to set him up. So we have no choice but to be true to the faith. And our hope ultimately, I think, heaven wins in the end. And this is the hope in the book, which people have already seen it, that it's very, very hopeful. This pus is coming out now by the bushel basket, whether it's in government, academia, corporate, in any genre or milieu that you want to look at, we can see nothing but corruption and vice and all sorts of illicit affairs of how people are promoted from within in their agendas, whether it's, any of the heinous agendas that we see every day. We don't need to get into them. We know them. And we're so bothered by them, people are feeling paralyzed. But any athlete will tell you, some of the greatest athletes in every single sport talk about they have the butterflies, and many of the greatest athletes throw up before every single game. And this is absolutely an historical athletic fact. They throw up before every single game. But then, as they all say, when they step out on the ice or they step out on that floor or step out on that field, it all goes away. We have to eliminate fear. Fear is what stifles us. We have to just simply move out in faith and in truth, and we have to get involved. One of my greatest laments as an adult is so few people speak out. They always want somebody else to do it. People speak about, if they see trash, in front of their house, don't expect somebody, something falling off a truck or something. You go pick it up. You pick it up. You do something. Everybody wants somebody else to do something. And if you really listen to any of the debates, the presidential debates, and what politicians are speaking about, they're speaking about two things fundamentally. What is the role of government in our life? How much does it give us, and what can we get? That's always a tenet of all of the debates, if you listen carefully. Do we get more Social Security, more Medicaid, more Medicare, more benefits from me? And the other thing they're speaking about is the 10th and the 11th Amendment, the role of the federal government versus state rights. These are the dialogues. Right now, we're seeing it with the Dobbs decision, where the decisions have been back to the states, and we see a lot of the red states like Tennessee, Louisiana, South Dakota, and other states now banning abortion outright. So this is the core fundamentals. So we have to get involved at the local level. And the first thing the liberals and progressives and the unbelievers and the pagans have gone after, they've gone after the local level. That's why George Soros started funding the district attorneys. And we got 3 in Virginia, in Northern Virginia, that he put $500,000 to each one. And they got extremely liberal, godly, godless district attorneys. And so we have to get involved by running for the school board and being engaged versus thinking somebody else will do something for us. We have to be involved. My problem in life has never been not speaking up. My problem's always been knowing when to shut up. And as I say,
we all have to have something that we're lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly going to be, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I were a wallflower.
Oh, jeez. Well, on that note, I think we'll leave it there. I think that this has been just a most dynamic conversation and thoroughly enlightening for me. I love to hear someone like you who can precisely speak what we know in our heart and would like to speak as well. And you just put it together. And it's just so beautiful, and it's true. And I feel so upbeat about it. And I feel that there is a community out there, and so many of us now should know that we are united. We just have to now do the Daniel factor, do those fundamental steps and be a community, get involved, and not just wait for someone else to do it, and focus. No time for fear, but there is time for trust and loving and making that change positively, so that regardless of what happens in the future, we're solid and we're one with God. And so,
two last things, two very, very quickly, of how much hope. Number one, we're not Sodom and Gomorrah. There are many, many more people. We know how Abraham negotiated with God, 50, 45, 40, right. 30, 25, down to 10. Lord, if there's 10 left.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but there's only 4 people that left. And what most people don't see about that story is Lot's daughters were both engaged or betrothed in the Old Testament. They were both engaged. But when Lot left with his wife and 2 daughters, there were only 4, but both of the daughters were engaged. But those men didn't have the same faith that even the daughters had. So they were told to leave and they left. But we're not Sodom and Gomorrah with just 4 people. There are many, many good people. We see them in what we do at Signs of the Times. We're in touch with all of these people, and they're the people that are active. But what is the ultimate hope? And I have 2 chapters in the book on this. The ultimate hope is going to be the warning and the miracle of Garabandal. We know we're getting closer. I don't think we're there just yet, because there's some things that through the prophecies that have not been met yet. But we know we're getting closer in the same way Mariana has said at Medjugorje. She said she sees signs that the secrets are getting closer. But we're not quite there yet. But with the rapid movement of these events, and if we had some sort of cataclysmic financial event, things could go quick, very, very fast. Or if we have this energy crisis that is happening in Europe, and we also have the great rivers and reservoirs of the world in the entire planet are drying up in front of our very eyes, where they're not even navigable for barges. But the warning and the miracle of Garabandal is actually, that's the great hope, because we're so interconnected as a world economy that what happens in Beijing or Moscow or Kiev today affects us wherever we're at, and we can see what that's doing. But the Lord has a plan. We're not to waffle. The entire history of the Bible is the Lord protects his people. And we have to stay in faith and believe. And if we do, we're going to be fine. But I have 2 chapters in the book on Garabandal and the warning and the miracle being God's ultimate act of mercy.
That's beautiful. Now, is that in addition to what was said at Medjugorje?
Well, I always make the point, you can't really.
Everyone says there's a sign that's going to happen, or a cross, and all these visionaries and prophets and mystics, they Our Lady says something specific for each place, but like you said, they're all connected, interconnected, all valid. So
they're connected,
Garamondal,
but
of
how
course.
they overlap is you have to be very cautious of saying what happens at one necessarily is going to happen at the other and be the same event.
Mhm.
Now, if somebody were to play Inspector Clouseau or Sherlock Holmes, they can surely come to the conclusion that it sure appears that a permanent sign is something that will be left at Garabandal, and there seems to be a permanent sign being left at Medjugorje. But mixing and matching these can be very, very dangerous, where you just assume, because don't forget what the word assume says. The word assume is it makes an ass out of you and me.
I love it. Okay, we'll leave it at that, Ted.
But too many people try to mix and match.
That's true. They do.
We know Garabandal will stand on its own. Padre Pio, Mother Teresa, John Paul II, some major spiritual figures in our generation and previously have believed in Garabandal. And it's going to be God's ultimate act of mercy, where we literally see the state of our soul as God would judge it. We're so far gone now as a world, not just the American culture, but as a world with godlessness. Heaven is going to meet evil with good on its own level and match it and supersede it.
And remember, we were told that even if the church dwindles away to barely anything, it may start little, but rebuild again in truth. So times may get so dark that the church looks like the church is nothing, but she will prevail and will rebuild. And so a lot to look forward to, a lot to ponder, and a lot of wisdom has been spoken. And I thank you, dear friend, for coming on today and being just a wonderful sign yourself for us to, you illuminate that light that, hey, I want to be around Ted.
Well, not everybody shares that.
I'm sure there are.
I don't think everybody shares that view.
I don't know. I do. I'm sure there are a lot of other people who do, the ones of the same community anyway. So, but many blessings. Thank you. And hope we can see you again very soon.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I'll do it anytime.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. God bless now. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Totus Tuus. Until next time. Bye now.